I was a cold-hearted capitalist in my past life. I just finished a massive play, stripping millions of dollars from some foreign investors, and I was ready to celebrate with a few blonde models at a hotel. Then, everything went black. I woke up with a splitting headache and a roar echoing in my ears. You dare accept the Empress's decree to recruit talent? If I don't break your legs today, I might as well kill myself. I blinked, trying to clear my vision. Everything around me looked wrong. I wasn't in a luxury hotel. I was sprawled across the top of a stone courtyard wall. Below me, a crowd of servants was shouting for me to be calm, their arms outstretched as if ready to catch me. At the front stood a middle-aged man. He looked dignified, but his face was twisted with a rage so intense it looked like he wanted to eat me alive. You beast. I'll give you 3 breaths to get down and stop making a fool of yourself. I felt a surge of irritation. This guy looked important, sure, but calling me a beast and threatening to break my legs? I was a top-tier shark in the 21st century. I didn't take crap from anyone. We lived in a society of law, didn't we? If he touched me, I'd sue him for every penny he had. You old geezer. I barked back, pointing a finger at him. Keep spraying filth from your mouth, and I'll punch your eyes out. The entire courtyard went silent. The servants looked like they'd seen a ghost. My mother, an elegant woman standing nearby, dropped her expensive jade ornament. It shattered on the ground, but she didn't even blink. The man's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He was shaking. You dare speak to your father like that? Old man, I shot back without thinking. Keep talking, and I'll tell you I'm your father. The man's face went white. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "Someone, bring me my long ladder and my broadsword. Instead of letting this beast offend the Empress and ruin the entire Gao family, I'll clear the lineage myself and beg Her Majesty for forgiveness." Armored guards rushed forward. They didn't just bring a ladder. They handed him a massive, gleaming blade. Wait, that was real steel. I looked at the ancient architecture and the traditional robes. A cold realization hit me. I hadn't just moved locations. I'd traveled through time. Suddenly, a flood of memories crashed into my brain. It hurt like a physical blow. When the dust settled, I realized the truth. This wasn't the modern world. This was the Great Qin Dynasty, a period of history that never existed in my books. The man below me was Gao Feng, the Vice Minister of Revenue. My grandfather was Gao Tianlong, a legendary general. And me? I was Gao Yang, the biggest, most useless playboy in the capital. 2 months ago, Empress Wu Zhao had taken the throne. She was ambitious and desperate for talent to save a crumbling empire surrounded by rebels and invaders. A month ago, she issued a decree for the worthy, promising high office to anyone with a plan to save the nation. The original Gao Yang, a complete idiot who only knew how to drink and gamble, had somehow managed to accept that decree. In this world, if you took the decree and actually had talent, you were set for life. But if you were a fraud looking for fame, it was 30 lashes at best, and execution for deceiving the monarch at worst. Gao Feng knew his son was a moron, which was why he was currently trying to kill me before the Empress could. I panicked. Gao Feng was climbing the ladder, sword in hand, and the killing intent in his eyes was very real. Sweat poured down my face. Gao Feng, don't you dare. My mother, Lady Li, threw herself in front of the ladder like a protective hen. If you want to kill Younger, you'll have to kill me first. Move, Gao Feng roared. The boy is insane. If he steps into the Golden Palace, he'll bring disaster to us all. Look at him. He's still up there acting like a fool. I didn't wait for another word. I scrambled down the wall as fast as my limbs would move. I hit the ground, smoothed out my silk robes, and bowed deeply. Father, I said, my voice calm and respectful. I accepted the decree because I wished to build a legacy and restore the glory of the Gao family. It wasn't an impulse. Gao Feng froze, as he wasn't used to me being this polite. He stared at me, his expression cold. When you were 17, you wrote a poem about charcoal that made us the laughingstock of the city. When you were 18, you wrote a poem about a big rock that became the shame of the literary world. Now you're 19, and you've involved us in the Empress's search for scholars. Do you have any idea what you've done? He gripped his sword tighter. I knew if I didn't give him a brilliant explanation right now, I was dead. Father, beating me won't change anything now, I said. The Empress has just ascended. She's hungry for talent. I've already taken the decree. If you stop me now, it's a sign of disrespect to her. At worst, it's treason. Gao Feng's pupils shrank. I'd hit his weak spot. He was a politician. He knew how the game was played. But he still looked skeptical. Since when did you become so sharp-tongued? I took a breath, channeling every bit of corporate manipulation I'd ever learned. Father, have you ever heard of the poisonous strategist? He frowned. Explain. There are 3 levels of strategy, I said, my voice dropping to a serious tone. Planning for oneself, planning for people, and planning for the world. To plan for the world when it's in chaos, with rebels inside and barbarians at the gates, ordinary methods won't work. You need a strategist who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. A poisonous strategist. Gao Feng looked stunned. He knew I was probably full of it, but it sounded plausible. He started to lower his sword, lost in thought. Just then, a soft, elegant voice drifted in from the gates. Uncle Gao, I hope I'm not intruding. I looked up. A young woman in a deep green dress was walking toward us. A woman with skin as pale as snow stood at the gates. Her eyes were ice cold, staring in our direction with a gaze that felt utterly indifferent. This was Song Qingqing, the daughter of the Minister of Rights. She was also my fiancée. Seeing her here gave me a bad feeling. We're practically family, Qingqing. No need to be so formal. My father, Gao Feng said. He forced a soft smile, his anger from moments ago vanishing the second he saw her. Song Qingqing lifted her chin, her expression haughty. Uncle Gao, she said coldly. I've come today to break off the engagement. The words hit the estate like a bomb. The air turned heavy. My father's face darkened instantly. This marriage had been arranged since we were children. We were supposed to be wed soon. You don't just walk away from a contract like that. What is the meaning of this? Gao Feng's voice was like ice. Does the Song family intend to humiliate the house of the Duke? I stood there, processing it all. I'd just traveled to this world, and I was already getting dumped? It felt like a cliché plot from a novel, but in reality, it was a massive slap in the face. In this society, the woman calling off a wedding was a public execution of our family's reputation. It's the decision of my entire clan, Song Qingqing said, her voice steady. I couldn't stop them even if I wanted to. My father told me to tell you that if the house of the Duke ever falls into trouble, the Song family will offer its full support. Get out, Gao Feng roared. Tell that old fox Song Li that if this engagement ends, it's because we ended it. Who does the Song family think they are? Song Qingqing didn't flinch. She looked at us with pity. Water flows downward, but people climb upward. That is the way of the world. The house of the Duke was once powerful, but the Empress has ascended. Power is shifting in the capital. As long as your father, the great Duke, lives, people respect you. But how many years does he have left? She glanced at me with pure disdain. Gao Yang just recklessly accepted a royal decree. This family is headed for a cliff. My future husband must be a dragon among men, a pillar of the state. He won't be a mediocre failure like Gao Yang. She turned on her heel and left with her servants. My father's face was purple with rage, his fists shaking. It was a total disgrace. But I started laughing. You brat. Gao Feng turned on me, his eyes blazing. You were just humiliated in public, and you're laughing? Father, I said, shaking my head. Why be upset over a woman so blinded by vanity? She sees the Empress's rise and fears our family won't survive the transition. She's terrified of being dragged down by my involvement with the scholar search. Let her go. We're better off. Gao Feng stared at me. He looked confused. Usually, his son was obsessed with Song Qingqing. Something was very different about me today. He sighed, the anger leaving him. Don't worry about the engagement, he muttered. I won't let this go easily. But right now, we have a bigger problem. The Empress is waiting. I'm taking you to the palace immediately. Once we're in the Golden Throne Hall, you're on your own. Don't try to be a hero. Just try not to get us executed. I followed him through the massive, crimson gates of the Great Qin Palace. We marched toward the Taiji Hall, the heart of the empire. Your Majesty, an official announced. Gao Yang, son of the Vice Minister of Revenue, has arrived to answer the decree. Enter, a regal, commanding voice echoed. Gao Feng pulled me into the hall. Rows of civil and military officials lined the sides, their curious eyes boring into me. I kept my head down until we finished our bows. Then I looked up. There she was, Empress Wu Zhao. She sat on the dragon throne, draped in golden robes. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but her eyes held a sharp, terrifying majesty. I realized then that if I wanted a good life in this world, I needed to cling to her. If I could prove my worth to her, the house of the Duke would be reborn. Wu Zhao looked at me, and I could see the faint flicker of disappointment in her eyes. She had probably read my file, the file of a lazy, useless noble son. But she had made a promise to see whoever took the decree, and she was a woman of her word. She just hoped I wouldn't make a fool of her in front of the court. My first question, she said, her voice light but heavy with authority. Suppose you are a newly appointed magistrate in a remote county overrun by bandits. One day, while patrolling the streets, a local butcher stops you and insults you to your face in front of everyone. This butcher has powerful connections in the capital. What do you do? The hall went silent. The officials began to whisper. It was a trick question. If I punished him, I'd offend the capital. If I let him go, I'd look weak. Wu Zhao tapped her finger on the throne, watching me. She didn't need a poet. She needed a poisonous strategist to deal with the corruption in her empire. I thought for a few seconds. I would smile, I said. I would thank him for pointing out my flaws. Wu Zhao's expression soured. She looked ready to dismiss me on the spot. But then I continued. Then, I said, my voice cold, I would secretly send a gift to the local bandit leader in the butcher's name. I'd make sure the bandits think the butcher is trying to bribe them to stay away. The bandits, being paranoid, will kill the butcher for me. Then, as the magistrate, I will lead my men to avenge the butcher, wipe out the bandits, and seize their loot. I'll return the butcher's property to his family, minus a heavy administration fee for the county treasury. The hall went dead quiet. The officials looked horrified. Wu Zhao's eyes snapped wide. A smile tugged at her lips. One move to kill the enemy, wipe out the bandits, get the money, and keep a clean reputation. It was ruthless. Interesting, she whispered. Now, a second question. Suppose you have just killed your enemy's entire family. As you stand among the bodies, feeling the rush of revenge, you find a single child hiding in the corner. What do? This was the ultimate test of morality versus pragmatism. I looked her straight in the eye. I would look at the child and say, remember my face. The next time we meet, I won't show any mercy. Wu Zhao shook her head. Disappointing. If I left the child alive, I was leaving a seed of vengeance to grow for 20 years. It was noble, but it was stupid. But I wasn't finished. I would say those words, I continued, and I would turn around to walk away. But then, I would suddenly spin back around, laugh, and say, Hey kid, looks like we just met again. The officials gasped. Some of them actually winced. My father closed his eyes, his face pale. The logic was simple. I gave him his mercy, then immediately met him again to finish the job. No loose ends. No future revenge. Wu Zhao stopped tapping her finger. She stared at me, her phoenix eyes burning with a sudden, intense light. Gao Feng stepped forward, trembling. Your Majesty, my son is a fool. He doesn't know what he's saying. Please, it's my fault for not raising him better. But the Empress wasn't angry. She was smiling. Please, Your Majesty, punish my son for his words, my father cried out, his voice trembling. But the Empress didn't look angry. Why should I punish him? Wu Zhao asked, a faint smile playing on her lips. My father froze. He looked confused, and so did the rest of the officials. In the Great Qin dynasty, we were supposed to rule with law and benevolence. Killing an innocent, unarmed child went against every moral code we held dear. Did the Empress actually like my cold-blooded answer? Your Majesty, a voice rang out, sharp and indignant. Death is the end of an enmity. A pile of bodies is enough for revenge. To slaughter an unarmed child is nothing short of barbaric. A man this cold-blooded will only bring disaster to the people if he becomes an official. I turned to see a young man in official robes, looking righteous and refined. Beside him, a white-haired general in silver armor nodded in agreement. Scholar Chui is right, the old general growled. The blades of Great Qin men are meant for the battlefield, not for cutting down the elderly and the young. To kill a child in cold blood is the act of a monster. I squinted at the old man. That was Wang Zhong, the general of broken barbarians. My father had told me he was my grandfather's oldest rival. Now I saw why. He was looking for any excuse to bury the Gao family. The other ministers began to murmur their support, sensing blood in the water. My father's face went pale, his fists clenched tight at his sides. The Gao family had been laying low for too long. Now, even the lowliest officials felt they could kick us while we were down. Wu Zhao didn't say a word. Her phoenix eyes shifted to me, waiting to see how I'd handle the pressure. She wanted to see if I'd buckle under the weight of the court's judgment. I smiled. I looked straight at Wang Zhong. General, your words are very noble. Truly, a great blade should never strike the young or the old. However, I also happen to carry a very small knife. Cui Xinghe, the young scholar, let out a disgusted huff. Wordplay. You are simply hiding your savage nature behind clever talk. I turned my gaze to him. Scholar Cui, I admire your high moral ground. But I am just an ordinary man. I don't have your nobility. I couldn't live the next 20 years of my life in fear, wondering when that child would return to kill my own family. How do you know he would seek revenge? Cui challenged. I laughed. Based on the Empress's premise, if the child's father had understood the concept of pulling weeds by the roots years ago, there wouldn't be a pile of bodies for me to stand over today. If I don't finish the job now, in 10 or 20 years, a new tragedy will fall on my house. I can live a lifetime with a guilty conscience, but I refuse to live a single day in fear. The room went silent. Cui's eyes widened. I saw a spark of genuine interest in Wu Zhao's expression. Of course, I continued casually. The whole bit about walking away and turning back was just a joke. If I were actually there, I'd give the kid a few pieces of silver. I'd say exactly what the general suggested. My blade does not strike the weak. Then, I'd let him go. Wang Zhong looked triumphant for a split second, until I finished. Then, I would follow him in the shadows. I'd see which relatives he ran to, or who took him in. And then, I would eliminate them altogether. When I do it, I'll be careful. Most people's hearts are on the left, but a few have them on the right. To be safe, I'll stab both sides of the chest. And I'll put one in the backside too, just to be sure. The silence in the Golden Hall was deafening. I saw officials actually recoil in horror. The air felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. Kill them with guilt, but never live in fear, I repeated. 2 stabs to the chest, 1 to the rear. Total elimination. Wang Zhong looked at me like I was a demon. He was probably thinking that if a kid this ruthless ever got power, his entire family line would be turned into mincemeat. Even my father looked chilled to the bone. Suddenly, another high-ranking general, Qin Jinghua, spoke up. Your Majesty, the boy has a point. In a blood feud, there is no such thing as young or old. Only survivors and the dead. I agree with his logic. Wu Zhao snapped out of her thoughts. She looked at me with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. This Gao Yang, he is interesting. She turned to the officials. In the face of an enemy, one should not be kind. One should be ruthless. I am very satisfied with your first answer. My father gasped. He couldn't believe his useless son had actually impressed the Empress. Wu Zhao leaned back, her voice turning cool and professional. The first question was just a small test of character. But to be an official of great Qin, to serve the people, that requires more than just ruthlessness. It requires brains. I caught a glimpse of her long legs through the slit of her dragon robes before lowering my head. Please, Your Majesty, give me your next challenge. I am ready to serve. This question is for everyone, Wu Zhao announced. Anyone who gives me a satisfactory answer will be promoted. The low-ranking officials perked up. This was their chance. Imagine you are a tea merchant from out of town, Wu Zhao began. You have traveled to a remote, impoverished mountain region in the south and leased a barren mountain to grow tea. To start, you need to clear the land. However, the local villagers are incredibly lazy. They refuse to work. Even the few you manage to hire are sluggish and slow. The planting season is approaching fast. If the land isn't cleared, you lose everything. What do? The hall fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of deep thought. This was a classic administrative nightmare. The problems were obvious. First, as an outsider, you have no local influence. Second, the work is backbreaking and the people don't want to do it. Third, even if you pay them, they'll just slack off the moment you turn your back. General Wang Zhong spoke up first. Your Majesty, that's easy. If one silver coin won't move them, give them 2 or 3. People will always work for enough money. Wu Zhao shook her head. General, a merchant seeks profit. If you triple the wages, your costs skyrocket. And as I said, the people are lazy. They will take your high wages and still do as little as possible. You have no roots there. How do you force them to work hard? Wang Zhong deflated. I didn't think of that. But Your Majesty, the problem is impossible. If you don't raise the pay, they won't come. If they are lazy by nature, you can't change them. Many officials nodded in agreement. It felt like an unsolvable riddle. Wu Zhao's gaze turned cold. If the problems facing our country were easy, I wouldn't need talented officials. There are administrative messes far worse than this across the empire. Are you saying we should just give up on them? The officials bowed their heads, terrified. No one dared to speak. Except for me. General Wang Zhong scrambled to his knees. Under the weight of Empress Wu Zhao's suffocating authority, every official in the hall bowed their heads. The Empress didn't stop. She said the problem wasn't the farming or the land itself. The real challenge was completing the task at the lowest cost and the highest speed. She turned her gaze toward Cui Xinhe. He was the top scholar of the great Qin dynasty, a man who supposedly wrote poetry at 8 and mastered the classics by 12. Cui, you are one of the 4 great talents of Chang'an, she said coldly. Do you have a solution? Cui Xinhe frowned, his face tight with concentration. Finally, he shook his head with a bitter smile. He asked for more time, just the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, promising a satisfactory answer. I knew what he was thinking. His plan was probably just a slightly smarter version of the general's, and it wouldn't satisfy her. The Empress moved on to Old Kai, a grand scholar and a giant in the literary world. He looked even more embarrassed, shaking his head. He had nothing better than pay them more, a solution she had already rejected. I could feel the temperature in the room dropping. The coldness in Wu Zhao's eyes was sharpening, though she kept her voice calm. Finally, she looked at me. Gao Yang, she said. Do you have an answer? I shook my head. I need to think as well. I wasn't being honest. I didn't like Cui Xinhe or the old scholar, but I wasn't stupid. If I blurted out the answer instantly while these geniuses were struggling, I'd make enemies for life. In my past life, I learned that showing off too much was a death sentence. Wu Zhao's lips curled into a smirk. She told me that since I had accepted her recruitment decree, she expected more from me. If I couldn't come up with something, she'd charge me with deceiving the emperor. Where are the black soldiers? She called out. Heavy footsteps echoed. Several imperial guards marched into the hall, hands on their blades. My father, Gao Feng, started shaking. A charge of deceiving the emperor could wipe out our entire family. He was about to step forward to beg for mercy when I spoke up. Your Majesty, I said, my voice steady. I've suddenly thought of a few strategies that might solve this. My father spun around, staring at me. Our eyes met, and for a second, I saw a flicker of recognition in him. He knew I was about to do something crazy. Wu Zhao leaned back. Speak. If I'm satisfied, you won't just be forgiven, you'll be rewarded. The officials all turned to look at me. After my earlier suggestion of pulling up the roots, they didn't look at me with contempt anymore. They looked at me with fear. They knew whatever came out of my mouth next would be sinister. I cleared my throat. From the perspective of the tea merchant, the goal is simple: cheap labor and maximum speed. But the locals are lazy and the work is hard. Even with high wages, they'll slack off because the merchant has no local power. To win, you have to play with human nature. I call this the monkey trap. Wu Zhao sat up straight, her phoenix-like eyes locked on me. How do you play with human nature? If I were the merchant, I began, I would start by hiring a dozen villagers at 3 or 5 times the normal wage. The hall erupted in scoffing. General Wang Zhong laughed out loud, mocking me for suggesting the same high-wage plan I had just criticized. Cui Xinhe just shook his head in disappointment. I didn't blink. For the first few days, I'd make them clear the land. I'd yell at them, act stressed, and pretend to be desperate while they lazily ignored me. In their eyes, I'd look like a frantic, pathetic monkey. They'd laugh at me behind my back. But after a few days, I would bury several pieces of gold on that barren mountain. The Empress's eyes widened. She shifted in her seat, a look of shock crossing her face. She was smart. She already saw where I was going. Once the gold is buried, I continued, It's only a matter of time before someone digs it up. Even if the person who finds it tries to hide it, the others working right next to him will see. When they start arguing, I'll rush over, acting terrified. I'll beg them to hand over the gold, and even give them a little extra silver to keep their mouths shut so no one else comes to claim the gold mine. I smiled thinly. Within hours, the rumor of a gold mine will spread through the entire village. For the cost of 1 or 2 pieces of gold, the evil in human nature will do the rest. The people who saw the gold won't be able to sit still. They'll be like ants on a hot pan. They won't wait for wages anymore, I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. They'll mobilize their entire families. They'll grab their hoes and rush up that mountain in the middle of the night, digging frantically to find their fortune. You won't have to pay them a single cent. They'll clear that land overnight, driven by the dream of getting rich. The officials were stunned. The logic was terrifyingly sound. Laziness disappears when greed takes over. Even Cui Shina had to admit it was brilliant, despite the flaws. My father just stared at me, his jaw dropping. He couldn't believe this was his son. Brilliant, Wu Zhao whispered. Using gold to trigger greed. They'll clear the whole mountain for you. Gao Yang, you haven't disappointed me. Wait, Your Majesty, I said, a dark smile playing on my lips. The plan isn't over. In fact, the most sinister part is just beginning. The Empress looked surprised. The officials were baffled. We already got the land cleared for free. What else was there? In a remote place like that, I said, the local magistrate is likely a corrupt official with no way to make money. Before I even start the trap, I would bribe him heavily. According to the law, that mountain is the merchant's private property. When the villagers spend all night digging up my land to find gold, they are breaking the law. My father's face turned pale. You brat, what are you saying? But Wu Zhao waved him off. Let him speak. We have plenty of corrupt officials in the provinces. What happens after the bribe, Gao Yang? I would report the villagers to the authorities, I said. I'd have the magistrate send soldiers to arrest them for trespassing and theft. I'd force them to hand back every piece of gold they found. People are jealous by nature. They'll start snitching on each other to see who else found gold. In the end, the land is cleared, the gold is returned, and I haven't spent a single copper on labor. General Wang Zhong looked horrified. The plan was too cruel. I had turned an entire village into free labor and then threw them in jail for the privilege. It wasn't just a strategy, it was a trap with no escape. General Wang Zhong stared at me, his eyes wide with pure terror. Even the Empress, Wu Zhao, leaned back, a look of grim admiration on her face. I had suggested bribing the local magistrate to reclaim the gold, and while it was a dark strategy, it was undeniably efficient. I had solved the labor problem with almost zero cost. Cui Xinghe, however, looked like he had swallowed a stone. He was the top scholar of the empire, the pride of the elite Cui family, and a man known for his brilliance. Now, I was stealing his spotlight in the middle of the imperial court. He couldn't handle it. Bribing a magistrate is no small expense, Cui Xinghe said, his voice cold and sharp. And the villagers would only have to return the gold. Is it really worth the risk of execution just to get some land cleared? I let out a soft laugh. Master Cui, do you really think collusion between officials and merchants is rare? You don't start with a massive bribe. You walk among the people to see who is greedy and who is honest. But the real sting of this trap isn't just the bribe. I paused for effect, scanning the room. What if the gold I buried wasn't actually gold? What if it was just copper-coated in a thin layer of gold leaf? The hall went dead silent. Cui Xinghe's face turned pale. The idea was monstrous. To lure an entire village into backbreaking labor with fake gold, only to arrest them for it later? It was pure evil. Empress Wu Zhao gripped the arms of her dragon throne. Gold on the outside, copper on the inside, she murmured. Ruthless. I paced across the golden hall, as if I were taking a casual stroll in my own backyard. I didn't care about the rules or the tension. I felt powerful. With the magistrate's cooperation, I continued. The soldiers would discover the fake gold on the spot. They'd claim the villagers stole real gold and replaced it with copper. Under the pressure of torture, those poor farmers would confess to anything. By the time they realized they were being framed, it would be too late. I smiled at the officials, who were now looking at me like I was a demon. They'd have no money to pay the fines. Their only choice? Sign a contract to become my tea slaves for life. Of course, I'd be smart. I'd hire guards to prevent a revolt, but I'd also give them a glimmer of hope. I'd promise them freedom after 5 or 10 years of hard work. The harder they worked, the sooner they'd be free. I took a breath and added one final touch. Once the business grew, I'd build roads and bridges to transport my tea. I'd tell the world I was doing it for the villagers. I'd end up with a reputation as the greatest philanthropist in the region. The silence in the hall was heavy enough to suffocate. The civil and military officials stared at me, their lips trembling. Even the Empress was staring straight at me, her fingers tightening around the throne. She had set this riddle to test our reaction speed and our understanding of human nature. She believed that in a world full of chaos, only someone who understood the darkness in men's hearts could truly rule. She wanted a capable minister, someone who could use unconventional means to fix a broken empire. But I had gone far beyond her expectations. I hadn't just solved the problem. I had created a perfect, inescapable trap. I had turned the villagers into monkeys and played them for my own gain. I saw a flicker of resolve in the Empress's eyes. She was likely thinking that if I didn't join the government, she could never let me become a merchant. I would ruin half the population before breakfast. Cui Xinghe stood frozen, unable to find a single flaw in my logic. My father, Gao Feng, looked back at me with a shaking heart. He couldn't believe this cunning, treacherous person was his own son, a descendant of a long line of honorable generals. He was actually afraid of me. I looked at Wu Zhao and sighed with feigned regret. Your Majesty, the time was too short. This plan still has holes. If you gave me more time, I could make it truly perfect. The officials felt their scalps go numb. Not perfect? This plan already destroyed lives and stole land for free. If it were perfect, would anyone even be left alive? Old man Zhou stood up, his body trembling with rage. Your Majesty, this plan is too sinister. I beg you to punish Gao Yang severely. I concur, another official shouted. And I. Soon, half the court was bowing, calling for my head. Most were my father's political rivals, seizing the chance to strike. My father stepped forward, his voice booming. A technique is neither good nor evil. It depends on the person using it. My son's plan is harsh, but it is effective. Cui Xinghe joined the protesters. Your Majesty, this is too cruel to be adopted. Wu Zhao's cold gaze swept over the room. The air seemed to freeze. If you all think this plan is too cruel, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous low, then do any of you have a better one? Old man Zhou and Cui Xinghe went silent. They had nothing. Wu Zhao stood up, her regal presence filling the room. To me, a good plan is one that achieves its goal. Gao Yang's strategy is ruthless, but from the perspective of a merchant, it is the best possible path. We live in a world of corrupt officials and greedy men. Sometimes, you must use evil to fight evil. She looked at the officials as if warning them. The fact that he could devise this in such a short time proves his talent. She turned away, her long robes sweeping the floor. I am tired. Court is dismissed. I stood there, blinking. That's it. She just left? What about my reward? I was expecting 10,000 taels of gold, or at least a few beautiful maids. This empress was stingy. As the officials began to filter out, they whispered and pointed at me. I knew that by sunset, my name would be the talk of all Chang'an. I followed my father out into the bright, warm sunlight, feeling the heat on my back as the monkey trap echoed through the halls of power. The sunlight outside the palace was so bright I could barely keep my eyes open. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The danger was gone. I had survived the court session. I honestly didn't expect the Empress to love my poisonous strategies so much. But it worked out. Ask me to save the country or help the poor, and I'm useless. Ask me for a wicked plan. I have a stomach full of them. In that department, I'm a professional. I glanced at my father. Father, the Empress didn't punish me. I guess I passed the test. You won't beat me when we get home, right? The Gao family tradition was simple. If a kid messes up, use a stick. I am satisfied with your performance today, my father, Gao Feng said. His voice sounded strange, like he was hiding something heavy in his heart. I didn't think much of it. Instead, I started dreaming about the future. My dad was the vice minister of revenue. My grandfather was a duke of the realm. In this great Tang dynasty, I was a top-tier official's son. If I had this status in my previous life, I wouldn't have spent my time studying scams and traps. I could have just written an essay called My Grandfather the Duke and won every competition in the country. With this kind of power, I could walk sideways through the streets of Chang'an and nobody would dare touch me. I should definitely visit a brothel soon. I needed to see what the famous courtesans of the ancient world were really like. It would be a waste of my reputation as a spoiled brat if I didn't. Suddenly, my father stopped dead in his tracks. I wasn't paying attention and slammed right into his back. My forehead throbbed. I rubbed it, looking up to see him staring at me with a look so complex I couldn't read it. "Dad, what's wrong?" I asked, getting nervous. Was he finally going to hit me? He didn't say a word. He just kept staring. After a long, silent minute, he reached out and patted my shoulder. "They say brothers fight tigers together, and fathers and sons go to war together," he muttered. "This is my first time being a father. I've made mistakes. Don't take them to heart." Then he turned and walked away. His shadow stretched out long against the golden pavement. He looked like a man carrying a heavy burden. I stood there, completely confused. What was that supposed to be? An apology? While we walked home, the news of what happened in the palace spread through Chang'an like wildfire. The Empress's 2 questions and my 2 answers were being whispered in every tea house and alleyway. The news was traveling faster than I was. Back at the Duke's mansion, in a room filled with old armor and the scent of iron, an old man stood tall. This was Gao Tianlong, my grandfather, the top military man in the Great Tang. He had survived 50 years of bloody wars to build this family's legacy. Even at 70, he stood like a sharp sword. "Fetch my armor," the old man growled. "I must see the Empress." The family butler, old Fu, looked worried. "Lord Duke," the young master was reckless to accept the decree. "Someone must be behind this, trying to push our family off a cliff." Gao Tianlong's eyes were cold. "If it were just kids playing games, I wouldn't care. But they are targeting my grandson to hurt our family. I'll go to the palace. I don't know how much my old face is worth to the Empress anymore, but I have to try." He sighed deeply. He had 3 sons, but only my father had any real status. The others were far away at the borders. And the grandsons? All of them were useless brats, and I was the worst of the lot. The Gao family looked strong, but it was rotting from the inside. Just then, a servant came sprinting into the courtyard, shouting at the top of his lungs. "Lord Duke, there's good news and bad news." Grandfather sneered. "Good news? What good news could we possibly have? Even the Song family dared to break the marriage engagement today. Our reputation is in the gutter." "The young master passed," the servant gasped. "He answered the Empress's questions in the Golden Hall. The whole city is talking about his brilliant plan." Grandfather's hand jerked, nearly ripping out several hairs from his beard. "What? He wasn't punished? He actually passed." "It's true. Everyone says the young master has been hiding his genius for years." Grandfather burst into a roar of laughter. "A dragon begets a dragon. My grandson isn't a failure after all. So what's the bad news?" The servant hesitated. "The bad news is, the young master's plans were so wicked that even the Empress went silent. The commoners are calling him a demon. They say he's the most cold-blooded man in the city." The servant explained the monkey trap and the tea plantation scheme in detail. The guards in the room looked horrified. To trick villagers into clearing land for free, then arrest them and turn them into debt slaves, all while being called a great benefactor. Even my grandfather, who had seen the darkest parts of war, went quiet. He realized his grandson was more ruthless than anyone he had ever met. Meanwhile, at the Song mansion, Song Qingqing sat on a stone bench, her beautiful face frozen like a mask. When she saw her father enter, she stood up quickly. "Father, how did the Empress punish the Gao family?" she asked. Her father, Song Li, looked at her with a grim expression. "The engagement is truly broken?" "Yes," she nodded. Gao Feng was furious, but he couldn't do anything. "Why? Did something happen at court?" Song Li sighed, his face dark with regret. "Gao Yang has been hiding his true self. He is talented, terrifyingly so. The Gao family didn't fall. They just became more dangerous than ever." Song Qingqing's face went pale. She had thought she was escaping a sinking ship, but she had just jumped off a treasure galleon. Song Li's face was grim, but Song Qingqing didn't share his fear. She smiled, trying to soothe his worries. "Father, why are you so concerned?" she asked. "The Empress didn't reward him in public, which means she hasn't made a choice yet. Besides, everyone in Chang'an knows Gao Yang loves me like a precious treasure. There's still room to negotiate. Even if things go south, the world is full of powerful families. With my beauty and talent, I'll find a scholar 100 times better than Gao Yang to bring honor to our family. The Duke's estate is old and fading. It's no loss to let it go." Hearing her confidence, Song Li felt his heart settle slightly. Meanwhile, my father and I stepped off the carriage and pushed open the heavy gates of the Duke's mansion. My father's face was still a mask of frustration as he stormed toward the inner courtyard. I didn't follow him. I headed straight for my own room. Being the top of the 6 great dukes of the Great Qin dynasty had its perks. My grandfather, Gao Tianlong, was a living legend, a god of war who rarely lost a battle. The rewards he'd accumulated over a lifetime were staggering. The Gao estate was massive, a maze of rock gardens and long corridors that seemed to stretch forever. By the time I reached my room, I was exhausted. I collapsed onto my bed, the feeling of the dry, soft sheets making every cell in my body hum with relief. It felt amazing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. The Gao family might be on a downward slide, but a lean camel is still bigger than a horse. Having a duke for a grandfather and a high-ranking official for a father meant I could basically walk sideways through Chang'an like a king. Now, I just needed to stay on the Empress's good side. If I played my cards right, my life here would be incredibly comfortable. I wondered what kind of official position she'd give me. Since I traveled back in time, I figured I might as well build a legacy and do something big. Suddenly, my door slammed open. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old with her hair in a ponytail, burst in. She had big, round eyes and a face like a porcelain doll. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. "Brother," she wailed, "how are you not dead yet?" While I was dealing with my sister, my father entered a room deep in the inner courtyard. He bowed respectfully to my grandfather. In the Great Qin, filial piety was everything. Grandfather was calmly playing with pieces on a chessboard. "I heard about Yanger," he said without looking up. The brat hid his true self well. Today wasn't just good for him, it was good for the whole Gao family. "But the Empress didn't reward him," my father countered, his voice thick with worry. "It means the dust hasn't settled yet. Yanger has a reputation for being a wild playboy," grandfather said, moving a piece. "Cui Xinghe was the Empress's top choice, a top scholar who knows how to rule. It's natural for her to hesitate. But knowing her, she'll set one final test between them. Her ambition is no smaller than the late emperor's." My father's brow furrowed. "If Yanger can't beat Cui Xinghe, is he still in danger?" "Not necessarily," grandfather chuckled. "I've lived nearly 70 years and served 3 emperors. I've seen every dirty trick in the book, but a plan as poisonous as Yanger's? That's a first. He might surprise us again. Even if he doesn't, as long as I'm breathing, I can keep him alive. Let him stir up some trouble while I'm still around." My father nodded, then remembered something else. "Song Li's daughter came to break the engagement today. People are talking. What should we do?" Grandfather's eyes turned cold. "The Duke's engagement isn't something you just toss away. If the Song family wants to be ungrateful, they can face the consequences. Kick every single one of their relatives out of the military. Not one stays. I'll play the role of a mad old man seeking revenge. The Empress won't say a word about it. Now forget that. Life is for enjoying. Come, play a game with me." My father looked at the chessboard like it was a battlefield he was destined to lose. "Father, you're the chess champion of the empire. Bullying me is a bit much, don't you think?" Grandfather laughed, stroking his beard. "At least you know your place. I'll give you a one-piece head start." My father sighed and sat down. "Fine, but let's agree now. If you lose, no hitting me with the chessboard." Over in the Phoenix Palace, Empress Wu Zhao sat in her golden dragon robes, her expression unreadable. "Your Majesty, are you still thinking about Gao Yang?" her attendant, Shang Wanwaner, asked. The Empress nodded. The rumors in the city were wrong. A plan that Ruthless doesn't come from a simple spoiled brat. Even I have never seen anything quite like it. Shang Wanwaner agreed. When she first heard the details of the monkey trap, she was shaken. Gao Yang's grasp of human nature, specifically the darkness in people, was terrifying. If used correctly, he could be a great asset, she admitted. The Empress looked at her, surprised. Shangwan Wanner was proud. She rarely praised anyone that highly. Then who do you think is better? Who should help me build an empire that will last forever? Gao Yang or Cui Xinghe? Cui Xinghe, Wanner answered without hesitation. He is a pillar of the state. His theories on governance address the core issues of our empire. If you want a foundation for 10,000 years, he is the only choice. The Empress looked out the window. And yet, I have a feeling about Gao Yang. I think he's the one I'm looking for. Wanna looked confused. But he has a terrible track record. How can a man who plays with people's hearts compare to a scholar who understands the law? The Empress picked up a scroll. We'll see. Disasters have struck several provinces, and the people are restless. In Linjiang City, grain merchants are hoarding food, and prices are skyrocketing. The nearby Qingshui City is facing the same crisis. The people can't afford to eat. She looked at Wanner with cold, sharp eyes. Issue a decree. Give Gao Yang the power of an imperial censor and send him to Linjiang. Give Cui Xinghe the same rank and send him to Qingshui. I want to see who can stabilize the grain prices and bring peace to the people the fastest. Wanner was shocked, but she immediately began drafting the orders. Cui Xinghe is capable. Qingshui will be fine. But as for Gao Yang, Wanner, you will go with him. If I've misjudged him and things take a turn for the worse, you interfere. But don't move unless it's absolutely necessary. Go now. The disaster won't wait. Tell them to leave immediately. Wu Zhao stood in the Golden Throne Hall, her gaze piercing through the window as if she could see across the entire Great Qin Empire. She wasn't just looking at the landscape. She was looking at history. I wasn't there to hear it, but I could imagine her cold, determined voice. She wanted to prove that a woman could rule, that a woman could lead this empire to greatness and end 600 years of chaos by conquering the Seven Kingdoms. But while she was dreaming of empires, the reality on the ground was much grimmer. Disaster had struck, and the grain merchants were feasting on the misery of the people. The first decree went to Cui Xinghe. He stood there in his official robes, his handsome face glowing with excitement as the words were read. He was appointed as a temporary imperial censor and sent to Qingshui City. His mission was simple: stabilize grain prices and restore peace. He took the decree with trembling hands, his heart racing. Wanner, the Empress's assistant, didn't stay long. She told him to pack quickly and leave immediately. As she walked away, Cui Xinghe noticed she held a second scroll. His eyes narrowed. She was heading toward the Duke of Ding's estate, my home. His face darkened instantly. His father, Cui Jian, the head of one of the most powerful families in the land, stepped up beside him. He knew exactly what was happening. This was a test, a direct competition between the prestigious Cui family and me, Gao Yang. In terms of schemes, you might not match that boy, his father told him. But in terms of governing a country, 100 of him couldn't equal you. Qingshui's prices will drop within 15 days. Go, my son. Show them you have the talent of a prime minister. Meanwhile, back at the Gao estate, I was dealing with a different kind of crisis. A little girl was crying her eyes out in front of me. This was Gao Ling, my second uncle's daughter. She had always been close to me, but right now, I wasn't sure if she was worried about me or cursing me. Brother, she wailed, her chubby face wet with tears. I heard the servants say you accepted a crazy imperial decree and you're going to be executed. Is it true? I sighed. Kids really have no filter. I'm not dead yet, Linga. She looked up at me, blinking her big, teary eyes. But brother, you promised to buy me peach cakes from the east side of the city. Can you buy them now? If you get executed later, who's going to buy them for me? My jaw dropped. I started looking around the yard for something specific. Brother, what are you looking for? She asked innocently. I'm looking for a bamboo switch, I muttered. I think it's time to give you a childhood memory you'll never forget. She realized her mistake and bolted like a slippery eel. I'm sorry. Don't hit me. Get back here. If I don't teach you a lesson today, I'll change my name. I chased her through the courtyard, laughing despite myself. Living here felt strange. In my past life, I was alone, but here, everything felt familiar and warm. I actually like this family. The imperial decree has arrived. The shout echoed through the estate. I stopped chasing Linger and let her go. You're lucky, I whispered. Let's see what the Empress has sent me. We all gathered in the outer courtyard. Warner stood there, holding the golden silk scroll, flanked by imperial guards. Her face was like stone. My grandfather, the Duke of Ding, Gao Tianlong, stood at the front. He was the only one who didn't kneel. 50 years of bloody service to the Empire gave him the right to just bow slightly. I, however, had to hit the dirt. I hated the kneeling, but I wasn't suicidal. I stole a glance at my grandfather. He was old, his hair white, but he radiated an aura of power that made it hard to breathe. You brat, my father, Gao Feng, hissed beside me. Keep your head down. Be respectful, or you'll get us all killed. He was terrified. He knew these decrees were rarely good news. Warner opened the scroll, and her voice rang out. I was being appointed as a temporary imperial censor and sent to Linjiang City. Same mission as Cui Xingha. Fix the grain crisis, or else. I took the decree, a wry smile on my face. I realized then that the Empress wasn't just giving me a job, she was throwing me into the deep end. This was the jump from theory to practice. If I failed to lower those prices, my head, or at least my career, was on the chopping block. She was using a city full of people as a training ground for me. That was cold, even for her. My father was horrified. How can he handle this? He's just a boy. This is a disaster. Wana didn't care. She was annoyed that she had to travel with me, convinced that I was going to lose to Cui Xingha. The Empress's word is final, she said coldly. Pack your things, Master Gao. We leave now. My grandfather turned to me. His expression was unreadable, but his voice held a hidden weight. This is your test. If you succeed, you rise to the heavens. But remember, it is better to do nothing than to do something wrong. If you fail but stay within the lines, I can still protect your life. It was the closest thing to I love you I was ever going to get from the old man. I went back to my room to pack. It wasn't like a long move. It was more like a business trip. I threw a few changes of clothes into a bag and headed for the door. But as soon as I pushed it open, I stopped. My father, Gao Feng, was waiting for me. His face was tense, but beside him stood my mother, Lady Li. She looked elegant, yet her eyes were filled with motherly worry as she looked at me. Linjiang City was over 100 miles from Chang'an. To her, this journey was a sentence of suffering. Lu Luo, my mother called out. A delicate, pretty girl dressed in green stepped forward. You will go with Younger. Take care of his daily needs. Lu Luo bowed quickly, her voice soft and fragile. I looked at her, and my eyes lit up. My mother really knew how to look after me. Lu Luo, however, stole a shy, terrified glance at me. To her, I probably looked like a predator, a wolf or a tiger ready to pounce. Then my little sister, Gao Ling, came hopping over. She handed me a small, wrapped bundle, her young face full of reluctance. Big brother, these are peach blossom cakes. Take them for the road. She clearly loved those sweets, but she didn't hesitate to press them into my hands. Next to her stood a young man who looked a bit like me, but with a more rebellious streak. This was my younger brother, Gao Chongwen. Brother, you'll be gone for at least half a month, maybe a month, Chongwen said with a smirk. Don't worry about the girls you frequent at the Rouge Pavilion in the capital. I'll take good care of them for you while you're gone. My eye twitched. Before I could even snap at him, my father exploded. You animal. Get out of my sight in 3 seconds, or I'll kill you. Chongwen didn't wait. He bolted toward the estate gates, shouting back over his shoulder. Brother, rest easy. Your women are in good hands. My father closed his eyes in pain, probably wondering why he hadn't just stayed in bed the night he conceived that boy. His blood pressure was clearly hitting the ceiling. Father, don't be angry, I said with a smile. As the eldest brother, I'm like a father figure to him. When I return, I'll personally discipline him until he changes his ways. Gao Feng pressed a hand to his chest, taking a long moment to steady himself. This is an opportunity, but it's also a crisis, he said seriously. Chang'an is full of hidden currents right now. If you find you can't handle things, do what your grandfather said. The Gao family can still protect you. Just don't try to be a hero and let things spiral out of control. I felt a genuine tug at my heart. My mother giving me her personal maid, my sister giving me her favorite snacks, and my father, despite calling me a brat every 5 minutes, standing up for me in the imperial palace. Even my stoic grandfather was shielding me in his own way. In my past life, I had none of this. Now, I had a family that actually cared. I gave them a confident smile. A young eagle has to spread its wings eventually. I can't stay under the family's shadow forever if I want to look down upon the world. The Empress has just taken the throne. She needs talent. If I can prove my worth to her, I'll ensure the Gao family's glory lasts another 100 years. My father moved, visibly shaken by my words. A look of pride finally flashed in his eyes. The grain crisis in Linjiang is nothing, I continued. I'll have it solved within 10 days. Father, wait for the good news in Chang'an. Soon, it'll be my turn to carry the weight of this family. I'm off. I gave them a respectful bow and turned away. Luluo picked up my bags and followed me closely. I knew the stakes. The Gao family had served 3 generations of generals, but we were surrounded by enemies waiting for us to fall. To keep this peaceful life, I had to cling to the Empress's power. Cui Xinghe is part of this too, isn't he? Her face changed instantly. How did you know? Her reaction told me everything. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked, how much power do I actually have on this trip? You are a temporary imperial censor, she replied gravely. You represent the Empress. You have the power of life and death. Everyone in Linjiang, from the county magistrate to the commoners, must follow your orders. Including you? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. According to the decree, as long as you don't overstep, I am under your command. In that case, official Shangguan. Let me see those legs, I said suddenly. The temperature in the carriage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Her face turned thunderous. Master Gao, don't you think you're being a bit too bold? I rubbed my nose. I was just testing her. She was clearly carrying a hidden imperial sword from the Empress to keep me in check. But as long as I was the boss in Linjiang, I could work with that. My eyes grew cold as I thought about the merchants driving up grain prices. Lu Luo, sensing the suffocating tension in the carriage, turned pale. She timidly shifted her own slender legs toward me. Young master, if you want to look at legs, maybe you could just look at mine for now. No one spoke. The carriage rattled out of Chang'an. I took a few glances at Lu Luo's legs, then opened the curtain to watch the great city fade into the distance. 2 days later, we reached Linjiang. The county magistrate, Du Jiang, was waiting outside the government office with a line of officials. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. How much longer until the imperial censor arrives? Du Jiang asked. Don't worry, magistrate, his secretary replied, peering down the road. They should be here any minute. The grain prices are skyrocketing, Du Jiang groaned. The 4 big merchant families, Qian, Zhao, Han, and Ling, are all playing games. The price of grain has jumped from 40 coins a bucket to 100. The people can't afford to eat. I've tried everything, even opening the government granaries, but the prices won't stop rising. I'm at my wit's end. He was desperate. These merchants were vultures, picking the bones of a city suffering from constant rain and disaster. His only hope was the official from the capital. Sir, someone's coming, the secretary shouted. Du Jiang looked up. At the end of the road, a carriage appeared, flanked by armored soldiers on horseback. When the carriage stopped, I stepped out and took a deep breath of the fresh air. Finally, I looked at Du Jiang, a man in his 40s who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. My work was about to begin. I stood there in my long blue robes, my eyes burning with exhaustion. Next to me, Shangguan Wanner stepped forward, holding the imperial decree. Her voice was cold and sharp. Magistrate Du, she announced. This is the imperial censor specially appointed by the Empress to handle the disaster in Linjiang. From this moment on, every matter in this city, large or small, is under the control of young Master Gao. Du Jiang took the decree, his hands trembling as he verified the seal. When he looked back at me, his face was a mask of shock. I was far too young. To him, putting the lives of hundreds of thousands of people in the hands of a kid like me was a cruel joke. But the decree was real. He had to swallow his pride. Lower official Du Jiang greets young Master Gao, he said, bowing low. He couldn't hide the weariness in his voice. No need for formalities, magistrate, I said, waving a hand. I was delayed 2 days on the road. Tell me, what's the current situation in Linjiang? Du Jiang seemed slightly relieved by my directness. He invited me into the government office, speaking quickly as we walked. The heavy rains just stopped, but the damage is done, he explained. Crops are ruined. The major grain merchants have seized the chance to hoard everything. In just 10 days, the price of grain has jumped from 40 coins a bucket to 100. I opened the government granaries to flood the market, but it barely helped. On top of that, refugees are pouring into the city. If we don't settle them soon, there will be a riot. Shangwan frowned. The situation was much worse than the report suggested. She looked at me, wondering how I could possibly fix a mess this deep. Young Master Gao, how do we break this deadlock? Du Jiang asked. I remained expressionless, listening until he finished. Then, a small smile played on my lips. This isn't a hard puzzle to solve, I said. Shangwan stared at me in shock. Du Jiang looked like he'd just seen a ghost. He bowed even deeper this time. Please, censor, enlighten me. On behalf of the 100,000 citizens of Linjiang, I thank you. It was clear Du Jiang actually cared about his people. I looked out the window at the thin, starving refugees lining the streets. First step, I said calmly. Close the government granaries. The room went silent. Shangwan looked stunned. Du Jiang's face turned from confusion to pure rage. Are you mocking me? Du Jiang barked. Even with the granaries open, we can't stop the prices from rising. If we close them, the price will hit 200 coins instantly. The people will starve. Are you insane? Shangwan kept quiet, remembering the Empress's orders not to interfere unless absolutely necessary, but her eyes were full of doubt. The Great Tang has had nothing but droughts and floods lately, I said, my voice steady. Our national reserves are low. How much grain is left in your granary? Is it enough to feed everyone for even 5 days? Du Jiang froze. No, it's not. Then what's the point? I asked, staring him down. Even at 100 coins, how many poor villagers can actually afford to buy it? You're just delaying the inevitable. I cannot agree with this. Du Jiang shouted. I stepped closer, my gaze turning cold. I'm not explaining myself to you, magistrate. I am giving you an order. You don't have the right to choose. The air in the room turned heavy. My tone left no room for argument. Du Jiang clenched his fists, his knuckles white. He knew that with that decree in my hand, I could have his head if he resisted. Fine, Du Jiang spat. I will close the granaries and post the notice. But mark my words, if the prices skyrocket and the city falls into chaos, the responsibility is yours. If the price of grain doesn't drop within 7 days, I replied, I will take full responsibility, even if it costs me my life. Du Jiang's face turned ashen. He was convinced I was just a reckless fraud who had somehow tricked the Empress. To him, I was gambling with the lives of thousands. He decided right then that if things went south, he'd take me down with him, regardless of my power or backing. Bring me the map of the Linjiang region, I commanded. A map was spread across the table. I scanned the geography of the city and its surrounding rivers. How is grain usually transported here? Du Jiang sneered, his contempt for me growing. By land and water. But since we're near the Qingshui and Kunming rivers, water is faster and cheaper. Do you actually have a plan, or are you just looking at the scenery? I ignored the jab. My finger traced the path of the Qingshui River. The 4 biggest grain families, you know them? The Qian, Zhao, Han, and Ling families, Du Jiang said. They've been here for a century. They're vultures. They've bought up every scrap of grain in the city, forcing the smaller shops to follow their lead. They're making a fortune off this disaster. But the city's mood is violent right now. We can't use force to seize their stock, or we'll trigger a full-scale rebellion. I smiled. Magistrate, prepare a banquet. The finest food and wine you can find. I want to host a dinner for the heads of those 4 families. Du Jiang shook his head in disgust. I've already tried that. It doesn't work. These men only care about profit. They won't lower prices just because you ask nicely. Just do it, I said, walking toward the inner chambers. Du Jiang slammed his sleeve down and stormed off in the opposite direction. Then I'll wait to see your brilliance fail. Shangwan watched me go, her mind racing. She had no idea what I was planning, but she was starting to realize that I never did anything without a reason. Meanwhile, in the depths of the luxurious Ling family estate, the mood was very different. The estate was a masterpiece of gardens and pavilions, a world away from the starving streets outside. Inside the lakeside pavilion, 3 middle-aged men sat around an elderly man dressed in rich silk. "Old Man Ling," one of them said, holding a message from the magistrate's office. "Du Jiang says a new censor from the capital has arrived to take over. He summoned us all to a banquet. He's clearly going to pressure us to drop our prices. What do we do?" The collar and cuffs of Old Man Ling's robe were stitched with gold thread and encrusted with precious jewels. He looked at the message from the magistrate and didn't seem worried at all. His face remained calm, almost indifferent. He looked at the other 3 family heads and spoke with a steady voice. He told them there was nothing to fear from this banquet. If the new official asked them to lower prices, they would agree to lower them. He let out a cold, mocking laugh. He told them that as long as they stayed united, they held all the power. The great Qin dynasty had suffered years of natural disasters. He knew the official granaries in Linjiang City were almost empty. His plan was simple. Whatever grain the government released, they would buy it all up immediately. They wouldn't just keep the price steady. They would push it up to 110 won per do. He promised them that if they seized this opportunity, their descendants would never have to worry about money again. I saw greed flare up in their eyes. At 110 won, with the massive stockpiles they held, they stood to make a fortune beyond imagination. They agreed. They figured the empress had just taken the throne and wouldn't dare use brute force against them. But the head of the Zhao family looked worried. He had heard this new censor was very young and came directly from Chang'an. He feared the boy had a powerful background. He warned that if they offended someone that important, it could mean the end of their families. Old Man Ling's expression shifted slightly at that. He knew the law mattered, but he also knew politics. He decided they should give the boy a little face. The current price was 100 won. He suggested they offer to drop it by 5 won at the dinner. It was a token gesture, a tiny sacrifice to keep the censor happy. But his eyes turned sharp as he warned them that if anyone actually stood in the way of his fortune, he wouldn't let it go. Back at the magistrate's office, I sat in the guest of honor's seat. Shangwan Wanner and Du Jiang sat on either side of me, while my maid, LV Luo, stood behind me. The table was covered in the finest meats and wine, the aroma filling the room. I sat there quietly, my finger tapping a slow, rhythmic beat on the table. Du Jiang couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told me these grain merchants were old foxes and that getting them to lower prices was harder than killing them. He bet that 5 won would be their absolute limit. I looked at him calmly. I told him he needed to keep his composure. I told him that if a local official lost his cool, he'd never be able to handle the market. He was a good man, but too impulsive. I decided this would be a good lesson for him. He turned red with anger and told me he'd just wait and see how brilliant I really was. Just then, a soldier hurried in. The heads of the Qian, Zhao, Han, and Ling families had arrived. I told him to let them in. As the 4 men walked in, I took one look at them and almost laughed. These were the wealthiest men for 100 miles, families that had ruled Linjiang for a century. Yet, they walked in wearing the plain, rough robes of common servants. It was a pathetic act. Shangwan Wanner looked at them with pure disgust. It was obvious they were trying to look poor to avoid being pressured. She bit her lip, clearly worried that my plan to lower prices was already dead. Old Man Ling bowed to me, his voice full of fake sorrow. He told me the city was in ruins from the floods, and the streets were full of starving refugees. He claimed his heart bled for them. He told me they had spent all their money on porridge sheds and disaster relief. He sighed, claiming they were practically bankrupt. The others joined in immediately, nodding and moaning about how they had exhausted their resources for the people. Du Jiang looked like he wanted to flip the table. It was a total lie. Their estates were as grand as any duke's mansion in the capital, and they employed hundreds of people. If they released even a fraction of their hoarded grain, no one would be starving. They were vultures. I didn't get angry. I just nodded and praised their noble spirits. I told them I was impressed by their compassion. Then, I reminded them that the Empress had given me full authority over everything in Linjiang. Old Man Ling sensed an opening. He looked at the others and announced that since I had arrived, his family would show their sincerity. He offered to lower the price by 5 won, claiming he would be selling at a loss. The others followed suit, putting on a show of painful sacrifice. Du Jiang wasn't surprised. He knew their games. But then, I shook my head. Old Man Ling's face soured. He thought I was being greedy. Dropping 5 per dough already meant losing tens of thousands of silver pieces in potential profit. He gritted his teeth and asked if 8 would satisfy me. I shook my head again. The atmosphere turned cold. The 4 merchants looked like they were ready to declare war. Du Jiang watched me with a sneer, waiting for me to fail. But just as Old Man Ling turned to leave in a huff, I spoke up. My voice was ice cold. I told them I wanted the price of their grain raised to 150 per dough. I made it clear, the price was only allowed to go up, never down. I told them if anyone dared to sell grain for less than 151, I would execute them personally. The room went dead silent. Old Man Ling's hand shook so hard, he nearly ripped his own beard out. He stared at me, his wrinkled face frozen in shock. The other 3 merchants looked at me like I had lost my mind. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Du Jiang was horrified. He had expected me to haggle for a lower price, not drive it through the roof. 101 was already more than the common people could afford. 151 was a death sentence for the city. He wanted to scream at me, but I was his superior. Even Shangwan Wanner was stunned. Her eyes were wide with confusion. We were here to fix the crisis, not make it worse. She knew this was my big test from the Empress, a test that could save or destroy my family's reputation. She couldn't understand why I was pushing the price to such a terrifying, impossible number. Shangwan Wanner stared at me, her mind clearly racing. She had served the Empress for months and dealt with every kind of official imaginable, the cunning, the cruel, the rigidly upright. But she had never seen anyone like me. I didn't follow the rules. I didn't even follow the map. Old Man Ling looked like he had seen a ghost. His eyes were wide with disbelief. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. He told me he was getting old and his ears might be failing him. He asked me to repeat what I had just said. He couldn't believe I was demanding they sell grain for no less than 150 per dough. The other 3 merchant lords turned their heads in unison, their eyes locked on me. I didn't flinch. I let my fingers tap slowly on the table, the rhythmic sound echoing in the silent room. I smiled faintly and asked if my instructions were really that hard to understand. I made it crystal clear. The price was 151. If I caught anyone selling for less, their head would roll. Once they realized I was serious, their expressions shifted. These were men who lived for profit, and despite their attempts to stay composed, they couldn't hide their joy. They had expected me to drag them down. Instead, I was pushing them to the moon. 151 was an astronomical price. The profit margins were terrifying. In Linjiang City, these 4 families controlled almost all the grain. When the price had hit 101, the people cursed them daily. But now it was a government mandate. They wouldn't be the villains, the county office would. They could get rich beyond their wildest dreams and keep their hands clean. Old Man Ling looked like he wanted to burst out laughing. He had lived a long time, but he'd never seen a deal this good. Yet, the more excited he got, the more cautious he became. A golden glint flashed in his cloudy eyes. He asked me if I would post an official government bulletin regarding this new price. The other 3 lords, Qian, Han, and Zhao, all leaned in. They were smart. They needed it in writing. Without a public notice, I could flip the script on them later and leave them hanging. They wouldn't move until the law was literally pasted on the walls. I looked Old Man Ling in the eye and nodded. I told them that as soon as this meal was over, the bulletins would be posted in every street and alleyway of Linjiang. Grain was not to be sold for a single one under 150. The 4 of them shared a look. Their hearts were finally at peace. They saw a mountain of wealth descending upon them, a once-in-a-century opportunity to cement their family legacies. For the rest of the meal, I ate heartily while they barely touched their food. They spent the entire time drowning me in flattery, their compliments flowing like a river. As soon as they left the building, the merchant lords gathered outside. Master Qian couldn't help himself. He asked Old Man Ling what I was playing at. Why would a government official raise the price instead of lowering it? He smelled a trap. Old Man Ling snorted. He told them he had seen many things, but he had never seen a grain price go up and then magically drop back down. He didn't care what my plan was. He told them to stop worrying and start hoarding. This was a gift from heaven. If they seized this moment, their families wouldn't have to worry for 100 years. As for the chaos in the city, that wasn't their problem. They were just following the law. He told them they were fools if they hesitated. Master Qin quickly apologized, admitting he was just stunned by the sheer luck of it all. The heads of the Zhao and Han families fell in line immediately. They always moved as one. Old Man Ling looked out at the people walking the streets of Linjiang. Greed burned in his eyes. He ordered them to move fast. Before the bulletins were even dry, they were to sweep up every last bit of grain on the market at the current price of 101. Once the government notice went up, the price wouldn't stop at 150. In a famine, there is no ceiling. When people are starving, they will sell their very souls to buy a bowl of rice. He knew what this meant. At 101, people were already dying. At 150, the city would become a graveyard. Thousands would starve. But these men didn't care. To them, a national disaster was just a business opportunity. Back inside the office, Du Jiang was shaking. He looked at me with a face full of horror. Parents would be forced to sell their children just to survive. I looked at him, my expression unchanging. I knew he was a rare, honest official. I already planned to recommend him for a promotion once we returned to the capital, but I couldn't explain my plan yet. In this corrupt city, even the walls had ears. If the merchants caught wind of my true intent, it would fail. I leaned in and gave him one hint. I told him that if he wanted to lower the price of grain, he didn't necessarily have to push it down. He needed to remember how a spring works. The harder you compress it, the more violently it eventually snaps back. The harder you compress a spring, the more terrifying the recoil. I looked at Du Jiang one last time, my voice steady. In 7 days, everything would be fine. I told him plainly that I wasn't the type of man to play games with my own life. I turned and walked out of the county office. I had eaten my fill and rested enough. Now, it was time for the real work. The Great Tang was suffering. The heavy rains hadn't just hit Linjiang. All 16 cities in Guangyang Prefecture were drowning. Linjiang was simply the epicenter of the chaos. A single wrong move here would ripple across the entire region, leaving countless people homeless and starving. Lowering the price of grain was only my first goal. The real challenge was finding a way for the commoners to survive this disaster. I wanted them to do more than just breathe. I wanted them to earn a living. I stood by the gates of the inner courtyard, staring out at the rain. I let the silence settle as I planned my next move. Behind me, Du Jiang was trembling with pure, unadulterated rage. He had been an official for 12 years and had seen every political trick in the book, but he had never heard of a strategy where you raised prices to lower them. To him, I was just an arrogant, silver-spoon madman who understood nothing of the real world. He was certain I was going to pay a heavy price for my ignorance. I didn't bother looking back at him. "Master Du," I called out, "give me a tour of the grounds. This office is a wreck. Once the grain prices crash in a few days, we're going to renovate the whole place." Du Jiang's eyes widened in horror. People were dying in the streets, and I was talking about luxury renovations? To him, I was no better than a tyrant preying on the weak. I didn't wait for his reply. I signaled to Lu Luo and walked out of the office, leaving the stunned official behind. "My lady," Du Jiang whispered, turning to Shang Wanwaner. He was desperate. "Are you really going to sit back and watch him destroy Linjiang?" He placed his last shred of hope on her. Shang Wanwaner was the Empress's favorite, the most powerful woman in the court. If she spoke up, this madness would end. Wanner watched me walk away, her beautiful face clouded with hesitation. If it had been anyone else, she would have stepped in long ago to stop the carnage. But it was me. And for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to move.